Good morning, everyone. I'm Susan Demas, the executive editor here at Lincoln Square, and welcome to the weekly assignment where executive producer Sam Osterhout and I talk to you about what's coming up on Lincoln Square, the latest headlines, and what we can all do to fight back against authoritarianism. Coming up, we'll welcome SiriusXM Progress host Joe Sudbay, big friend of the show. He's going to talk with us about some key primaries and Trump's revenge tour. But first, Sam, why don't we talk about the Rededicate 250 event on the National Mall on Sunday? This, I guess, was supposed to highlight the church's role in history and civic life in honor of our 250th anniversary this year. Trump skipped that event to go golfing, pretty on brand.
Yeah.
But he did send in a video message, and I think we have a clip of that.
Thus Solomon finished the house of the Lord and the king's house, and all that came into Solomon's heart to make in the house of the Lord, and in his own house he prosperously effected. And the Lord appeared to Solomon by night and said to him, I have heard your prayer and have chosen this place for myself for a house of sacrifice.
So, Sam, you host Unholy Ground with Andrew Watkins every week. So I really want to get your take on all this.
Yeah, this is wild. We've been looking at this for months now because they announced all of these things that were going to happen. Andrew calls this the brand launch, right, of white Christian nationalist government. And they have stated that along with Heritage Foundation, with all of the big hitters in the white Christian nationalist movement, that this isn't just about looking back at the glorious 250 years of white Christian misogyny that we've experienced, which we'll get into that in a minute, but this is really about the next 250 years of white Christian misogyny that they want to calcify in our system. And it is, I was laughing because Trump is like, and God said, and like, it's absurd. It's absolutely absurd. But I think beyond
you think that the guy who puts out AI slop of him as Jesus, you think he's not being sincere here?
Perhaps not. I think he sincerely wants power. And I think he sincerely wants wealth. And I think he sincerely wants to control as much of our cultural and social lives as he possibly can. And I think Christianity is the useful tool for this. White Christian nationalism, that is.
Yeah, I completely agree with you that, this is part of this campaign to rewrite American history. And all you have to do is look online at Christian nationalist historians like David Barton. It's all over the internet as far as them not using any kind of real historical information, but just ideology to try and convince people that this is how it always was and this is how it should be. And clearly, with the spread of AI, it's making it all the easier to spread misinformation. And the White House is 100% on board. So what do you make of that? Because, of course, Donald Trump, I don't think has been inside a church since his second inauguration. This is not a guy who, is clearly comfortable with his faith, whatever that is. So what do you think this is really about with the White House going full bore into this?
Well, I do. I really think that this isn't just an accidental plan or a thing that they've had on the books for a couple of weeks. This has been a very targeted, and Andrew's, I think, quite right calling it a brand launch. This is a celebration of white male Christian power, and it really is setting up something kind of grim. And I think there's some competition, and it might be quiet competition between not only the radical Christians in the administration and the the guys who are just simple grifters like Trump. But there's also a battle between the different sects of Christianity and extremist Christianity within that administration. And this is them all sort of coming together for a minute and just reaffirming their dedication to stripping away women's rights, going back to English common law and coverture laws where women stop being humans or individuals when they get married and start being the property of their husbands. Look, like, this all sounds wild, right? It sounds crazy. I recommend you all go back and watch On Holy Ground. It will sound it will still sound crazy, but we bring receipts to this stuff. This is not like some weird Da Vinci Code shit. This is stuff that's actually really happening, and it's what they really want to happen. And as dumb and stupid as this weekend's weird celebration was, and as dumb and weird and awkward as the ensuing, the UFC fight in June on his 80th birthday is going to be, take it seriously.
Yeah.
This is a big thing. Yeah.
So Trump wasn't able to make it, but Marco Rubio is there. Of course, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, who has one of the most radical preachers around as his personal pastor. House Speaker Mike Johnson, J.D. Vance was there. Mike Johnson, I think, really underscored your point about how so much of this is about controlling women, because in an interview, he was talking about just the evils of abortion medication and why it's so crucial for Republicans to stop this in the courts.
And by mailing the drugs to women across state lines, you go around the state laws. And they're exactly right. It's a serious problem. Abortions have increased in numbers since Dobbs overturned Roe. And that's a great concern to us. The mailing of this drug is a very dangerous thing. You're sending it to young.
So remember, when the Dobbs decision came down in 2022, this was all about letting the states decide what they wanted to do. Mike Johnson kind of has let us all know what complete bullshit all that was, and how this is really just about stopping abortion for everybody, no matter where you live in this country.
Look, these are the same people who think that we're not having enough babies because of feminism, right? That we have a demographic problem. People, and particularly, they mean white people, right? White people aren't having enough babies because women have too many freedoms.
That's how I feel every day. Just have
always
so much freedom.
So much. Yeah, so much. It's just, I'm drowning in freedom over here. And I wish I'd been drowning in babies this whole time.
I know. I love that my daughter has less rights than I did when I was her age. It's awesome.
But that's the game. And they, they're not keeping any of this secret. This is all here. Right.
Well, in addition to trying to control women and Trump stumbling over a biblical passage that he clearly had just encountered for the first time, we also had a huge endorsement that apparently God wants Trump's ballroom being built.
Hard to believe that it would take 2 centuries for the Lord to raise up a great man to bring that ballroom finally to stand where it needs to stand. It's extraordinary. We only had to wait 200 years.
You've got to be fucking kidding me. I didn't see that one until just now. Oh my God.
Amazing.
What? And the framers said, one day we will do this huge project, and within several centuries, we will finally have a ballroom.
On the 7th day, God said, and let there be ballroom.
Ugh. You know what? Like, this is where I really want to talk to Joe Sudbay, because it is so unpopular. It is a very unpopular thing. This ballroom, the war, the tariffs, the economy, all of it is so unpopular. And I'm so desperately curious to know how this is affecting midterms. And
yeah, let's bring Joe on. And I think we have some recent polling that would be great for us to kick this conversation off with. Joe, thank you for being here.
Hey, Joe.
Hey, Susan. Hi, Sam. Nice to see you guys again. And always fun to be here with you.
Yeah, great to be with you. So you've probably taken a look at those numbers from the New York Times. Even if you're not a polling expert, which you are, I mean, these numbers look bad, right? For Trump, this is not how you want to go into the midterms.
Yeah, it's not exactly going to instill confidence in Republicans, but at the same time, there's nothing they can do about it. They are stuck with him. And I know we're going to talk about some of the primaries and some of the results, but I think that's one of the really interesting dynamics that's playing out. These numbers are horrible. Even when you have Nate Cohn at the New York Times today saying, he's reaching a new low, and we've seen some of the other kind of pollsters and analysts talking about how they've had to change their charts to reflect how low he's going on some key issues. It's kind of amazing. And he also, when you look at some of the key issues in that polling too, his numbers he's down on immigration. He's underwater by 15 points. On the economy by 31 points. Now think about that. Those were supposed to be his two best issues, economy and immigration. People hate what he's doing on immigration, and they are feeling the effects of the economy. I mean, Donald Trump can say affordability is a hoax and, get mad at Democrats for talking about it. But in your lived experience, you're the expert. You know what you're paying for gas. You know what you're paying at the grocery store. You know what you're paying for your electric bill. Donald Trump doesn't, and not only doesn't know, he doesn't care. And he made that clear. Last week on his way to China, he basically said, I don't care.
Not his concern.
No.
But what he does seem to be concerned about is taking revenge on any Republicans who may have defied him. And we saw that over the weekend in Louisiana, where Senator Bill Cassidy, a medical doctor, did not even make the runoff for his primary. He finished third. Joe, were you surprised by that?
No, I really wasn't. And, we've seen a pattern here. Trump is on a mission to, get rid of anyone in the party who has defied him. Cassidy voted to impeach him. And Cassidy has done everything he can to kiss Trump's ass over the past few years to make up for it. I mean, he's the one, Dr. Cassidy is the one who helped give us RFK Jr.
Right.
And the menace towards all of our healthcare and all of our public health. So, Louisiana, look what happened in Louisiana over the past couple of days after the Calais decision. The governor, Jeff Landry, I mean, he couldn't be more of a caricature of an old plantation master, deciding that he's going to end voting and postpone voting in congressional races so he can eliminate black districts.
Right.
Black held districts. That was playing. It was one of the things that was interesting to me, and I'm a dork, so I pay attention to this. I was looking at the numbers, and there were about 400,000 votes cast on the Republican side. And this was when I was looking yesterday. And there were about 350,000 cast on the Democratic side. Which election got tons of attention, millions and millions and millions of dollars spent? The Republicans, right? You had member of Congress, a United States senator, a statewide official, 400,000 votes. Democrats, much more low-key event, 350,000. I thought that was really interesting to see that voters still showed up, Democratic voters showed up, and it goes to something I've been thinking, and we've talked a little bit. I do think voters understand the assignment right now, and we've seen it in a lot of special elections, and we've seen it in a lot of statewide elections and others.
Yeah. So previously, a couple of weeks ago, Indiana had their primary, and several Republicans who had bucked Trump on redistricting lost their primaries, kind of demonstrating what a lock Trump has on Republican primary politics. What I wanted to ask you, Joe, is what is the formula? If you go up against Trump, but you decide, wait, I want to save my own skin, I want to kiss his ass, how do you do that effectively? How do you become a Marco Rubio who is our Secretary of State and some people think is the odds-on favorite to be the Republican nominee in 2028. How do you become him and not Bill Cassidy, who now is leaving the Senate with his tail between his legs?
Well, Marco Rubio in 2017, late 2016, became a MAGA Republican. Completely. I mean, he just did. They had a very intense primary fight. They fought about a lot of things. I mean, I won't get into some of the things they fought about, but it had to do
Trump's
with
hand size. That was
hand size.
Yeah.
And Rubio told us how awful Trump would be. And then
Which he was correct about it.
Right. And the same with Lindsey Graham and the same with J.D. Vance. They told us how horrible Trump was going to be. Trump was that horrible. But they marched in lockstep. And there were a few of them. Look, after the January 6th attack on the Capitol, I think if the vote had been held a little sooner instead of delayed, you might have picked up a few more Republican votes. But I think after that, a lot of them thought this guy's finished, but he wasn't. And he controls that party. Now, I thought Indiana was interesting. And, this is how I look at things, Susan. You're from Michigan. That same night, there was a special election in Michigan, Senate District, I think it was 35, Shedrick Green running, Saginaw Bay County, right around that area. And this was a district that Kamala Harris won by 1 point, 50-49. Shedrick Green won 59-39. Now, what's important about this race is it literally was control of the Michigan State Senate. It was either going to be 20-18 or 19-19. So both parties knew the stakes. Right. And Shedrick won by 20 points. And that was happening the same night that Republicans were losing in Indiana. And I saw a quote from G. Elliott Morris, who I just think is terrific. And he said, to survive a Republican primary today, for example, an elected official has to satisfy a base that is absolutely rabid for Trumpism. Fealty to the president is the price one has to pay for victory, yet such fealty is toxic in general elections. And I think, and in the matchups between Democrats and Republicans these over the past year and a half, we have seen Democrats overperforming by about 13 points, and including in some very red districts, having some upset wins. And I think, the Republicans are having their fights among themselves about who can be most loyal to Donald Trump. And that may work in really hardcore red areas, but once you step outside of that, it creates problems for them.
Well, and that was my question, particularly about redistricting at this point, because we know that redistricting tends, if you create a safe red space, then you're not having a wealth of ideas, right? You're having a rush to the right. Same in a blue space, right? If it's safe blue, there you ultimately go to where the base is and further and beyond and beyond. But is that an opening for Democrats? I mean, it seems like the far right candidate, the Trump candidate, is so toxic in these safe red districts that it's not like the district is completely bereft of Democrats. I mean, there are contingencies. Like if they're winning by 5 points in those safe districts, is 5 points enough for a red district?
I think that's what we're going to find out. I mean, the overperformance has been around 13, and a good example, and Tennessee has been front and center because that's the other state that, boy, they were just rabid to eliminate the district that was a majority minority district in that state. And the way they did it, the show that those Republicans put on, I mean, it was like a Klan rally. It really was.
It really was.
We had Gloria Johnson on, state representative, one of the Tennessee three, and hearing her describe the scene, it was really chilling. I mean, it really harkened back to like the 1960s fights that we saw.
Yes. And I over the weekend, I had Ellie Phillips on State of the States, and she's running in for the State House in the Clarksville area. And she was there too, and just describing it and how ugly it was. And then what did they do? The speaker pulled committee assignments from every Democrat because they protested. Right. It's just so appalling. But remember last December, there was a special election in the state. Afton Bain ran.
Right.
It was an open seat, and she overperformed by 13 points.
Right.
And the turnout matched 2022, so it was an apples to apples kind of analysis. And I know they've made the district very red, but I think they've also really, really lit a fire under a lot of Democrats in that state and a lot of activists in that state. And I think that's happening around the country. We saw an amazing march in Selma this past weekend.
Yeah.
I do think that, voters, again, when you see this, Republicans are very full of themselves after the Calais decision, and certainly after what the Supreme Court did in Virginia, the state Supreme Court. But, they have, I think they've really shown who they are. And it's something that we've all talked about for so long. Like, I feel like so many of us in the progressive world have said, this is their plan. I mean, John Roberts had a 40-year plan to destroy the Voting Rights Act. And they've had a long-term plan, and they are unabashed about their racism. And I think a lot of people in the media had a hard time accepting that and believing it and even acknowledging it after. Mm-hmm. But everybody else knows what they're seeing. Right. Especially the level of intensity with which these Republicans in these southern states have acted has just been, I think it's even beyond what I would have expected. And I have very low expectations for that crowd.
Yeah, we have a clip of Mike Johnson talking about how this is just all about fairness and Black voters have nothing to complain about.
Mm.
So what is your message to Black Americans, Black voters, about this redistricting?
The Supreme Court issued a long-awaited opinion, and I think it was long overdue, and they stated the obvious that drawing congressional lines must be fair. You cannot draw lines on the basis of race, and that's what was done in Louisiana. So they declared it to be an unconstitutional gerrymander, and it was. This brings back fairness and certainty to the system. And
yet they so skillfully were able to draw, like a 9-0 map to draw Black Americans out of a district in Nashville and in Memphis, in Tennessee. So apparently drawing districts on the basis of race only goes one way for being wrong.
Absolutely. And you know what? A good example of this is Alabama, where the redistricting was forced on Alabama by a court because Alabama pretty much made it clear we're doing discriminatory gerrymandering. They were very blatant about their racism, and the district court said no, and the Supreme Court let it proceed. So they're under those maps now. So there was some sense that maybe because Alito provided just a little wiggle room, if you absolutely do it for racist reasons, that's not going to work under the Voting Rights Act. Alabama did it anyways, and the Supreme Court just gave them the green light. That same Supreme Court gave them the green light to proceed. Now there'll be a hearing later this week in Alabama on a 3-judge panel. But literally, if they pull out what Alito said, then there should be no effort to move forward in redistricting. Those lines, those congressional lines should hold. This is where we're going to see that any effort to try and pretend that the Voting Rights Act wasn't destroyed is going to be on full display.
Well, and here's the thing, like, look, every decision that we've made, when you build your nation on the back of non-white people and in a race capacity, then every decision you've made for 500 years has been based on race, right? Yep. And so obviously when the Democrats are going to try to redistrict, they might happen to get 1 or 2 or 3 more Black districts. That will be based on race because you're elevating the Black voters. When the Republicans do it, it is not based on race because it is demoting Black voters, right? It is creating that space. So something's got to be done, right? Do you see this? It really is an abhorrent process, this sort of stumbling into redistricting in this way. are we going to have a knee jerk? Are we going to have, is there going to be a backlash where we eventually decide on some new mapping, some new independent mapping? How does this play out in the long term?
I think that's
it's unsustainable. We can't do this.
It is unsustainable, and it's not the way it's supposed to be, but it hasn't been the way it's supposed to be for a while. I think we have to take, personally, I think several steps need to be taken. One of the things that happened over the past few weeks is John Roberts was at a judicial conference in Pennsylvania and was whining that people thought they were being political.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you are, and you showed us, and you've shown us repeatedly. And there may be a few legal pundits who say the court tries to take a middle of the road position. That's over. This is a very blatant court. We've seen it. And again, I think especially with this letting Alabama proceed, they're not playing. They have chosen a side. They're Republican operatives. So any conversation has to include what we do about the Supreme Court, because we're not going to be able to live under the Supreme Court. We're going to have to expand the court, I think, and we're going to have to, you can change the jurisdiction that the court has over certain matters. And I think that's going to be part of it. Look, remember in I think it was 22, there was an effort to pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Act.
Right.
Passed in the House. Joe Biden went to Capitol Hill to ask Senate Democrats, waive the filibuster rule to do this. And
Right.
2 Democratic senators said no. I mean, I remember Kirsten Sinema got on the floor, famously in wearing her cross, even though she campaigned as an atheist, and gave a speech about why she wouldn't do that. So there are legislative solutions. It takes will, and you've got to have the right people in place. But I do think that what's happened over the past few weeks has really, pulled the masks off. I mean, they're not even wearing their white hooded masks anymore. They don't need to. They feel fully empowered, and you have to use your power when you get it to fix this. And Democrats are going to have to fix this, whether they end racial gerrymandering or political gerrymandering legal through legislative process, and then deny the court the ability to overrule them and undo another Voting Rights Act. I think there's a lot of conversations happening right now about that. But the bottom line is, and I know it drives a lot of people crazy when you say we have to vote harder, but we have to make sure Democrats win in November, take back the House. And I think the Senate's in play too. And and there's something about Trump and all of this. Donald Trump doesn't care about Republicans. I mean, doesn't care about anyone, as he told us. And he's famously made that clear over time. He cares about one person. So for Trump, all of this gerrymandering and redistricting is about protecting him and his cronies from accountability. Now, Republicans like Mike Johnson and John Thune and other Republicans, John Roberts, they're indebted, obviously, to the billionaire class and their belief that America must be a white Christian nationalist state. But I do think for Trump's motivations are really about Trump and nothing else. The others have, motivations that are more white Christian nationalist. And I was watching you play the video at the beginning. I think I'd seen some reporting, and I checked the Times. The Times thought New York Times and others thought it was the same video he prepared a couple of weeks ago, because, talking about the Bible is not really Trump's forte.
No, he does not seem comfortable with that at all. That's not like, tweeting in the middle of the night to attack people or posting a weird picture of him with that super built up alien in China. I think we have that. That was an image to post. Joe, before we let you go, there we go. I mean, I don't know what you do with that, but before we let you go, we have another big primary in Kentucky with Thomas Massie, who votes with Republicans the vast majority of the time. He is a true blue conservative. The one thing that he has really broken with Trump on is the Epstein files. He was a true believer. He wants transparency there. And that's something that Trump and the base wanted until Donald Trump decided, wait, I don't like that my name's out there so much. Let's put the kibosh on it. And his acting attorney general, Todd Blanche, has been there to help him every step of the way to violate the law that Thomas Massie was really instrumental in passing, the Epstein Files Transparency Act. So now he's facing huge challenge. His opponent is extremely well funded. And this seems to be another referendum based on, how close you are to Donald Trump and how much he wants you gone. How do you see this one turning out?
Yeah, I think it's going to be fascinating. Tens of millions of dollars have been spent on this, tens of millions. And a lot of it's from Trump and his minions. AIPAC and their allies have pumped in around 9 million, I thought.
Miriam Adelson has given quite a bit. Yeah.
Yeah. And they all have their reasons for hating Massie. He's a quirky guy, and he's won pretty convincingly. I think it's going to be a real test. If he were to pull this out, I think it's going to be seen as quite a rebuke to Trump. And like you said, he's very conservative. He's like ultra conservative. He does vote against some of the spending bills because he thinks they're too much spending. But the big thing,
conservatives used to be on board with before Trump.
Right. So now he's. I think a lot of. It's so interesting too, how much kind of the DC media bubble focuses on these intra-GOP battles. It's like they're in a frenzy about it. Mm-hmm. And again, I think, like I said, I thought the big story that Tuesday night in Indiana was really Shedrick Green, but it is one of these things that you see this intra-GOP battle going on, and I think it will impact other races around the country. The other race tomorrow that I'm really interested in races are the Supreme Court races in Georgia. Really important, because if the two progressive Democratic candidates win, they're on the court. So it's election. It's not a primary in Georgia. Georgia's having a primary for a lot of races, but Miracle Rankin and Jen Jordan are running for Georgia Supreme Court. And I think that's another thing that's happened over the past few weeks and months, is how a lot of folks are realizing just the critical role that state Supreme Courts play in their lives, and state legislatures, which, I have been ranting about, in large part thanks to Sean Bertolo, for about 10 years on my show. Anything that happens in DC, there's a good chance it germinated in the state legislature.
Yeah, you make such a great point. I think after the 2020 election, Democrats in key states like Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, now Georgia, they got the message about how critical your state Supreme Court can be in some of these voting rights issues, not to mention abortion rights, and so many other cases. And we've seen that Democrats have had a lot of success in getting their candidates on the Supreme Court in their states. And that's really been a block on some of the conservative agenda that Trump and his allies have tried to push. So, Joe, we always love having you because you are so dialed into what's happening in states all over the country, and looking forward to talking with you again soon as this primary season continues to roll on.
Well, yeah, we gotta focus on states next time. Just only states. It's so fascinating to me.
Let me tell you just one last thing. There are so many states where Democrats have full slates of candidates on the ballot. Michigan, for example, Ohio's just about there. North Carolina, the recruitment, every candidate I talked to, Texas has 150 and every state Senate seat. And they are fired up and ready to go. And that's going to help up ticket too. The reverse coattails are really important. They're going to be talking to voters who haven't had a door knock from a Democrat in a long time. And so I think that's something we really have to pay attention to.
Absolutely. Joe Sudbay, what's the best way that people can find your work?
I'm mostly on Blue Sky at Joe Sudbay. I'm on Instagram, but I only do wildlife there because I am a wannabe wildlifer.
That sounds great. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Thank you both. Thanks, Susan. Thanks, Sam.
Thanks, Joe. Yeah,
we should focus. We should have a state focus show. I feel like anytime I have Joe on, that's what we talk about because I've covered state politics for so long. But I definitely feel like more of that is necessary this year.
I think people like you and Joe have understood that, and like our friend of Lincoln Square, David Pepper, who's, running for lieutenant governor of Ohio right now. the state houses have always been the laboratories of democracy and autocracy, and nobody understood that better than the Republicans for the last 50 years. Like, while we were all trying to run a great candidate at the top, either governorship or presidency, they were sneaking in their lunatics into the school board.
Right.
Right. They filtered up. We tried to find the star who could help us filter down, and it doesn't work that way.
Yeah. Yeah. I completely agree. Well, continuing on with our focus on what happened with Dr. Bill Cassidy in the Louisiana Senate primary, we will likely have Stuart Stevens on today. He has been covering Bill Cassidy, known him for years. You know, obviously Stuart has worked in Republican politics for years from Mississippi, has a lot of contacts down south, and really has a unique view on what happened, how Bill Cassidy was doomed to his fate. And Stuart also has just never, ever let him off for what he has done in inflicting RFK Jr. on us as our health secretary. So that will be a must watch.
Yeah, and that will come. I know Stuart has a possible hit on another network. So keep your eyes open for that. That should be 1 or 2 today. Yeah. Well, but it's a little in play.
Great.
That's the producer behind the scenes stuff. Like, scheduling.
Yeah.
The least sexy part of any job.
Right. But that's news, you know. We have breaking news that sometimes upsets the schedule. Sometimes people have conflicts, and that's the fun of Lincoln Square.
Yeah. Yeah.
On Tuesday, we will have former Congressman Adam Kinzinger, former Republican congressman from Illinois. He will be on the Frank Figliuzzi show. He and Frank are neighbors now in Texas, actually. And that should be a great conversation because Kinzinger knows from the inside what it's like to tingle with Donald Trump, and always has such a sharp perspective on whatever the president is doing.
Yeah, if you haven't caught the Frank Figliuzzi show, you really should go back and check it out. They're all, like, I find, another behind the scenes producer thing. You think about topics coming from the news cycle or evergreen, and the evergreen topics are the ones you can watch over and over and over. Frank, really threads the needle on both of those. He takes the headlines of the day and then he puts them in broader and bigger context. He's just he's a great interviewer, and he has such an incredible mind. You really should go back and watch.
Absolutely. Maya May and Michael Fanone on their show, The Revolution, they will have David Hogg, who is involved in trying to reshape the Democratic Party. His organization has made a lot of endorsements this cycle. Obviously, earlier this term, he was in the DNC. He isn't anymore. And he's such a great guest for them because that show is all about shaking things up. It's all about what we need to do to fight back. So that should be a great conversation. That will be on Thursday.
Yeah, that's going to be really, really great. And Mike and Maya are so good together because, we have this conversation behind the scenes where Mike is like, I'm so pissed off. I'm going to come out and rage. And Maya's like, we need to get through this, Michael. And it's like fire and ice. It's wonderful.
Yeah. There's such a great balance for one another, and they come from such different experiences. And that's kind of the fun of that show.
Yeah. They make a lot of discoveries. They really do.
Yeah. And that's what's great. One of the things I love the most about Lincoln Square is that we can get into issues. And when you turn on cable news, what you're going to get from certain hosts and certain guests. And that's fine if you want to get a quick news hit on the news of the day. But what I love is that our hosts really want to probe deeper on things. And we do have such surprising conversations with guests. We knew when we brought Joe on to talk about primaries that he was going to give really interesting insights from talking with people on the ground. But he's still going to surprise you with, drawing the lines with, the rally that Trump held with what's going on with the Voting Rights Act and that rally down in Alabama, in Montgomery, Alabama over the weekend. And that's what's so much fun. And so, if you're new here at Lincoln Square, that's what we try and bring you every week, every day. And so if you like some of the conversations you've seen, some of the articles and the columns that you've read, I'd encourage you to go ahead and subscribe for free. You can get so much of what we do here for free, and check out some of these conversations because they're really, really fascinating.
Yeah. And, one of the things I love the most about Lincoln Square is folks like Concern for Humans in the chat. Hey, great. I love your comments. The arc reactor, always the best. I have not been checking the Substack comments because when I do, my frame, like when I switch screens, I pause, I freeze. And so I'll hook up my other monitor and look at the Substack comments on the next thing we do. But missing people like Maxine and Patrick and all my faves. I feel like I really feel like I know you people, and that's maybe sad. But
no, that's
my only friend
thing is that we built this great community here. It's more than just building a news site, really, because it's shows like The Revolution where we try and take things a step further than just telling you what's going on, and really going that step further to how we can fight back together, what we need to do together. Because I know I have this feeling, and I'm sure you do several times a week, as you look at whatever dumbass thing Trump is doing, whatever depressing attacks they're making, and you feel really alone. But, when we look at the chat and we see what you guys are posting and your takes on everything, you realize there are a lot more of us than there are of them.
So many more. And like, we're a community that uplifts. That's what we try to do.
Right. Absolutely. Well, before we let you go today, we do have our weekly assignment, and that is, and you've seen this before, but I want to talk a little more about why we're doing this and what you'll see. So you're used to our calls for action tend to be pretty focused on Congress, which makes sense. They're doing a lot of terrible things there, like confirming Mark Wayne Mullen and Kevin Warsh as the new Fed chair. And so we will always be focused on what's going on in Washington. But from this conversation, how much is going on in your state? How much is going on in your own community? And so we're going to also take a look more this election year at some issues that we've heard from you are in your communities, and we want to give you the tools to fight back. And one of the biggest things that we hear from you is about the data centers, about their impact on your water and your electric bill and jobs, and how you're so concerned that people aren't listening to you. And so we have, if you click on that QR code, let me show you what will pop up. This is what pops up for me. This is my state senator, Sam Singh, and my state representative, Penelope Sterniglu, right here in Michigan, because I put in my information. We will take you right to the people you need to talk to. And so if you want to let your officials, your state officials, know what you think about data centers, this is a great way to do that, because we want to make it as easy as possible for you.
Yeah. And I know we're wrapping up, but the data center thing is, I think it's bigger than just not wanting a data center, because it would take us 40 years to build a mile or two of high-speed rail, right?
As we've seen.
Like, there's no reason me in New York, I shouldn't be able to get to Chicago on a train in a few hours. Right. And maybe that's an exaggeration, but that's possible.
Right. If you've traveled around Europe, if you've traveled around Japan, you know that it's possible.
It is possible. And yet we cannot do it. And yet a data center that is 6 miles in diameter can go up in a few weeks. we have our priorities dramatically wrong. So it's not just about not wanting data centers. It's about really wanting to build the world that you want to inhabit.
Right.
Is this it? I don't think so.
Right. And it's really easy for elected officials to hear from lobbyists and corporations. This is the way that they can hear from you, the people who vote for them.
That's right.
Yeah. Well, Sam, this has been fun. And to all of you, thank you for joining us. We always appreciate you being here somewhat early on a Monday morning.
Yes. Everyone, it's going to be a good week. Go get them.